Shalom. We are continuing now with Psalm 82, a psalm of Asaph. And it's worth noting at this point that this is one of a series of psalms, starting with Psalm 73 and continuing through the next Psalm 83, that are attributed to someone named Asaph. We really don't know who that was. It's possible the Asaphites were a group or a guild of musicians and poets who sang during the time of the First Temple. Maybe Asaph was a prominent member of that guild, of that group, but we don't know for sure. God stands in the divine assembly among the divine beings. He pronounces judgment. How long will you judge perversely, showing favor to the wicked, Selah? Judge the wretched and the orphan. Vindicate the lowly and the poor. Rescue the wretched and the needy. Save them from the hand of the wicked. They neither know nor understand. They go about in darkness. All the foundations of the earth totter. I had taken you for divine beings, sons of the Most High, all of you. But you shall die as men do, fall like any prince. Arise, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your possession. Now, who are these divine beings? What's the psalmist talking about here? In fact, the psalmist uses the word Elohim to refer first to God and then to divine beings. Now, remember that I mentioned in an earlier psalm that the two most widely used terms or names for God in the Bible are Elohim and Adonai. And the rabbinic sages attributed God's characteristics to each one of those terms. Elohim was understood as God in God's aspect of judgment and justice, and Adonai, God's aspect of infinite mercy and compassion. So in the context here, we have Elohim, God as judge, pronouncing judgment among the Elohim, same word, but here meant as divine beings. So a little Hebrew lesson here. Eloha, God, plural, Elohim, gods. Now, does that mean gods with a small g? How can that be? We all know that the Bible and Judaism embrace monotheism, the idea of one unique, omnipotent God, to the exclusion of all other deities or all other gods with a small g. So who are the gods, the divine beings here? Well, naturally, the psalmist is referring to angels, some kind of retinue of divine beings, angels who sit and witness as God pronounces judgment for and against the human community. Visualize a large hallway filled with these angels sitting there, these pure souls who listen silently as God judges the earth. Now, what is God judging here? Well, God is pronouncing judgment against those who judge, namely against the wicked people who judge the poor and the needy and the disenfranchised. That is to say, this psalm is directed against people in our society who use their power and their wealth and their influence to keep the poor, the orphan, the lowly, the needy, the wretched in, quote, their place, to keep them down and to prevent them from rising up and to gain equality with everybody else. The psalmist says, they, namely the wicked, neither know nor understand. They walk in darkness. And then the psalmist says something a little bit strange. He says, I had taken you for divine beings, sons of the Most High, all of you. The psalmist would wish that we, like the angels, could could have pure souls. The rabbinic tradition says that angels are incapable of knowing the difference between good and evil. Angels are incapable of doing anything wicked or evil. They are pure angelic beings. But we, as creatures of flesh and blood, of course, we are created with what are known as the Yetzer HaTov and the Yetzer Hara, the inclination for good and the inclination for evil. And very often that inclination for evil holds sway, and we act on that. The psalmist seems to be deeply concerned about the disenfranchised in our human community. And the psalmist would wish, it seems to me by implication, that there would be no such thing as want or poverty or wretchedness in our human society. And the psalmist seems to imply that the very existence of poverty in our world has something to do with the fact that there are people, always people, whom he calls wicked, who want to keep poverty and the poor in its place. As long as the poor and the wretched stay that way, the wicked can continue to wield their influence and their power and enjoy the comforts that they feel they deserve. As soon as those who are disenfranchised begin to catch up, and as soon as they no longer fall into the category of the wretched and the needy, then the wicked feel threatened and challenged, and they worry that they will fall from their high station. But the psalmist is unhappy with the situation as it is. Now, does this mean that the psalmist is a socialist or a communist or takes any particular political side or any political party or stance? I don't believe politics falls into play here at all. I think that it's not a matter of socialism versus capitalism or left wing versus right wing. It is simply a matter of understanding that as long as poverty exists in our world, it means that there is something broken. As long as there are people who are in want, people who are not able to put enough food on their table, to afford proper medical care, to receive the basic benefits and needs to which human beings are entitled. As long as that happens, it means that we live in a broken world, a world that needs tikkun, a world that needs repair. And thus the psalmist prays at the end, "Arise, O God, judge the earth, for all the nations are your possession." It's time, the psalmist believes, that God take a stand, that in the presence of all the other divine beings, that God judge us and take a stand and try to eradicate evil and wickedness in our midst. But that's not going to happen until we, human beings, do our part to eradicate poverty in our world. So much of it is unnecessary. As long as people are unable to earn enough through their work to support their families and their basic needs, as long as people are unable to maintain employment, as long as people are unable to have free access to the medical care, which is a basic human right, as long as this happens, we have an obligation to do more to alleviate the troubles that exist in our world and the lack of equality among human beings. We too can become like divine beings if we can do our best to level out the playing field and do our utmost to see to it that in our world, people will no longer be wanting or hungry or needlessly ill without the ability to find healing and hope. Thank you.